Hello Strutters, welcome to the Pauper Gauntlet. I'm Dan, it's round 6 and I'm gonna play Stompy tokens. This is brought to you by mtgotickets.com, the one-stop MTGO webshop. Fanny the Pussycat will get crushed by the great tokens who very much want to play first. Well, this is something. I'm going to keep it. Not till something else enters the fray. What about Fanny, the Pussycat? She exiles Riftbolt. That's interesting. So I guess I have to apply as much pressure as possible. So put more power on the board. So I attack. Play this so I get to untap. And then cast the first Sprout Swarm. As I do have the other. Like that. Then I'm gonna take a ton of damage. Then I have to start Sprout Swarming now to increase damage. I should do some math there. Because if I Sprout Swarm now, he will take 2 less damage. He can easily finish me in time. Scion is of course super good here. So I am just gonna smack face play Scion. Do 8 this turn. But is there a way to do 10 next turn? Then I need to Sprout Swarm. Here I should. Oh, there's no way to get the Sprout Swarm in. I have to get the fat guy in. But should I perhaps cast the other Sprout Swarm as a creature? To make that a 5/5 immediately. So I play Scion. Play the Sprout Swarm. He's a 5/5. Then I have 9 power next turn. It's too slow. But then I draw a creature and then I get 10 power next turn. But it doesn't matter. It still takes me... I do 4 now. It takes 3 turns to kill him, no matter how I do. And 4 is big enough. So attack. Play the Scion. And now I could Sprout Swarm, but I don't see a point. So I would rather just start Sprout Swarming for real next turn. He still has 5 cards. He only needs to do 11 damage. Well, he can't really attack with anything. And there is no way. Can I do 14 damage somehow? I don't think so. You know what I need? I need Essence Wardens. But I have Life Staffs in the sideboard. That must be a horrible mistake. Why do I have Life Staffs? How do I kill my own guys? Why is it not Essence Wardens? Oh, there are 4 Essence Wardens in my deck. So that's a pretty good draw. garden. And Sprout Swarm with buyback. But it's still only 9. It's still just lethal next turn. And he has all the time in the world to kill me. What? Why? Oh, what a shame. That was very interesting. But apparently he didn't have the kill here and then rage quit. That's how I interpret it. So, Stompy tokens is in round 7. Now we're getting close to top 10 territory. Interesting. You know, I have to pad this then. So, I am going to talk about my new YouTube channel. This channel. I'll bring it up. It's about the biggest unsolved murder in all of world history. The biggest investigation. Oh, what? Okay, sorry. Here is my channel. I need a picture up here. So on this channel, it's in Swedish. So if you don't know Swedish, there is a video on Fan of History explaining about this murder, because it's 30 years since the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme was shot dead on the street while walking home with his wife. That happened on the 28th of February 1986. A guy walked up right behind him and shot him in the back, killing him instantly. And then the guy ran away, and incredibly, despite it being the greatest unsolved murder investigation of all time, it is second only to the John F. Kennedy assassination. That has an official solution, which this one doesn't. Because they never caught the guy. There's still 6 people working full-time investigating this murder. 30 years later, good luck with that. 2 people have been arrested for the murder. 1 has been tried and convicted, but then freed in a higher instance. I'll show you the guys. So they know a lot, but there is no no evidence linking anyone to it. Only what do you call it? Circumstantial evidence. This is the first guy. He was arrested a couple of days after. He was sitting at a bar nearby just an hour before the murder, telling people how much he hated the prime minister, how much that somebody should shoot him. And then he left his business card to 2 girls he wanted to hook up with. So he was pretty easy to find, but he was much harder to convict. He had the prime minister was to the left. He was a social democrat. That's like Labour. It's far to the left of the American Democratic Party, which should be to the extreme right in Sweden. But this guy was far to the right. He had connections with a lot of seedy elements. He had gun experience. He might have had a gun. He might have been seen running into cinema right after the murder. He had a small bag that was exactly the same as the killer had. Because the only thing we know about killer, he's between 30 and 40 years old. He had like a long coat, and he ran with a limp, and he had a small bag, like 20 to 15 centimeter bag for keeping a camera or something in, and this guy had that. But he was released because they maltreated him, and the police and the DA just went crazy and fought each other. And now you're gonna see the guy who was convicted. It's Christer Pettersson, who became a celebrity. He was an alcoholic who looked like this. This was later though. But he was pointed. He was first the wife of the prime minister, who was walking right next to him, said that she didn't see the killer. But when it came to the trial, this alcoholic guy, she pointed him out with 100% certainty. And the court did not believe her. It was 3 years later, because the police had been hunting the Kurds, who had absolutely nothing to do with the murder. Actually, there was never any evidence at all connecting the Kurdish Worker Party, which had been branded as a terror organization by the Swedish government, the PKK, who are right now fighting the Islamic State in Iraq, I mean. So the police had spent time doing that instead of catching this Christer Pettersson guy, who was then convicted and then freed and became a celebrity of his own. Every other week he would admit that he was the murderer, as did 130 other people. And every other week he would say he was not the murderer, because he got money from a TV channel if they could interview him. And he said that he was the murderer, so he did. He was a very violent guy. He cut down people to the left and right. We killed a guy with a bayonet. And he used to rob drug dealers exactly at the location where the murder happened. So a very intriguing character. This is the guy who led the investigation for the first year. And he could not have done a worse job, because he totally destroyed the investigation. It was an incredibly bad investigation with huge resources, over 100 people working full time in the first year trying to solve this murder, and he went for the Kurds. We know that the murder weapon is probably a Smith & Wesson 357, which is what you can see in this picture. But that's all we know. We haven't found the weapon. There were about 500 legal guns of this sort in the area of Stockholm, the Swedish capital, at the time of the murder. And all but one has been shot. It has been tested to see if it is the murder weapon. And the guy who had the last one is another suspect. Oh, what a bad picture. Well, here is a picture of this guy. This guy, Christer Andersson, he had just been ruined by the Prime Minister's new law about trading stocks. So he couldn't, he was sitting in his apartment, he realized that he had to sell his apartment, and then a couple of days before the murder, he shot his Smith & Wesson 357 at his TV. Destroying his TV, while the Prime Minister, who is to the left there, was on the TV. He shot it, and his friends has testified that you couldn't talk to this guy about Olof Palme, about the Prime Minister, because he went into rage. He lived right next to the murder scene, and it took 8 years until they seriously investigated this guy. And by then he said that he had sold his Smith & Wesson, because they sent a lot of letters out. Please come in and test shoot your Smith & Wesson so we can see if it killed the Prime Minister. But he just didn't answer, and they didn't go for him until 8 years had passed by. At that point then he said I sold my gun to a drug addict in the park. And they were like, that's a crime. Yeah, but it was 2 years ago, so it's prescribed. You can't blame me for that. And he went free. They couldn't find anything on him. But in 2008, his brother was worried about him, and Christer was depressed. He was a loner. His life never got together after he was financially crushed by the new law in '86. So he had spent 22 years being bitter. But his brother was worried about him and called the police and said, can you please go check on my brother? Because he lived in another city. The police went to Christer Andersson's place, and when they knocked on the door and said that it was the police, he blew his brains out with a shotgun. So this guy is another likely killer. In fact, I run a whole YouTube channel and a podcast in Swedish about this murder. And the reason I can do that is that there are about 12,000 different interesting leads in the case. There 130 people have what do you say in English? Have admitted, no, have they've said that they are the murderer. There is a giant police conspiracy, or at least people claim that. There's a lot of people investigating this, blaming a certain number of the police. South Africa, during the truth trials in the 90s, when the apartheid regime was put on trial after it fell, a South African agent known as Prime Evil, Eugene de Kock, he said that, well, this was at the time that we shot the Swedish Prime Minister, talking about something else. And then he said, what? You shot the Prime Minister of Sweden? Oh, yeah, of course we did. And he said, this guy planned it, this guy did it. And they said, oh, no, we didn't shoot the Prime Minister. And then there was a lot of documents. And if you ask anyone in South Africa, they say, why are you still investigating that crap? You know we did it. So South Africa, big trace. There's, actually, my Patreon for the Palmemordet podcast sort of takes the 10 or 15 most interesting trails and follows them. So the next thing I will do on that podcast is to look into Rote Armee-Fraktion, the RAF, the German terrorist organization, because they claimed that they were responsible for the murder on the first night. And nobody believed them, or maybe somebody believed them. But then they claimed several times that they were not responsible for the murder. So that's the next thing I'm getting into on that podcast, sadly in Swedish. Okay, I can talk about this for so much. It is said that it takes a trained lawyer 12 years to read through all the documentation. They have several rooms in the police house near where I live here in Stockholm, just dedicated to storing documents concerning this assassination. So a lot of things have been investigated, but still no closer to the truth. Thank you for watching.